some people were very curious to know what I thought about Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition. And to my surprise, the reaction has been overwhelmingly negative to the idea of Dungeons & Dragons, and that's not surprising. Every time they release new D&D, the reaction from the fans of the previous version is almost always overwhelmingly negative, because there's grouchy people like me who didn't like 3rd edition. Actually, I was kind of one of the guys who stuck up for 3rd edition, didn't love it, but it was okay. My opinion of 3rd edition was, it starts off really well until you get to the point where you're doing prestige classes like 5th to 7th level. I thought 1 to 4 is actually really well done, but that game does not level up well. When you start getting to the point where you're like at level 9, characters are ridiculous. I find the skill system does not scale well. You're dealing with so many points, and at that point, characters have so many feats and powers that literally, like, every round, characters are warping reality, teleporting, doing really bizarre things, and just I find high-level campaigns in 3rd edition are among the loudest, stupidest Dragon Ball Z level power fucking gaming that you've ever seen. I hate Dungeons & Dragons beyond that point. And actually, I find that most D&D 3rd edition games don't go beyond that level. And I just find it goes beyond the kind of cinematic hero type game and becomes something where these characters are minor demigods. And to me, that always rubbed me the wrong way about Dungeons & Dragons. It seemed too much, too extravagant, too powerful, too much min-maxing, too much little powers that you have to deal with. You know what? I'm an old school D&D gamer. I played in the AD&D era. I didn't play much of the 1st edition D&D in like the blue boxes. I certainly didn't play the white box versions, but I did play the really old versions. I think I have them here. Where is it? Yeah, I mean, like, this is old school when you still had Satan on the cover. I mean, this was D&D. And I still, if you were to give me the choice any day of the week, if I was going to play any of these games, I would still choose like AD&D, probably the revised edition, just because I have all these. Actually, I don't have them on the shelf here, but like I have all the Splat books, like little floppy books. I love these. They had the kits, and it was so cool just to bring these to a game and play around with them. This is actually one of my favorites, the Complete Book of Necromancers. I don't know. I love this book. It was actually really rare at the time. I don't know how rare it is now, but nobody could get this when I had this, and so everyone wanted to borrow it. So, 4th edition. Really, it's not bad. I like it. In fact, I like it a lot better than 3rd and 3.5. And 3.5 did a lot to correct everything I didn't like about the 3rd edition. I thought it didn't scale well to high-level campaigns, but still. 3.5 fixed a lot, but 4 is actually pretty good. And I don't have much more to say than I said last time. It's really well balanced, and it's nothing like old school D&D. I'm not saying that it is. I'm saying, in terms of attracting new gamers and getting them familiar with the concept of role-playing, this is a good starter game. It's got a lot of... It builds like an MMO where you select a limited range of powers, and it keeps people in the game. Everyone has a definite role, and teamwork is rewarded. It feels like you're working as a unit, and I thought the classes, although they felt a little samey at first, I think they have done a lot to specialize the various classes, despite the little 4 roles of kind of like tank, spellcaster, controller, healer type guys. There's a lot of variations on the theme, and in fact, I think there may become way too many pretty soon. For instance, I think Forgotten Realms introduced some kind of like spell thief or like a spellblade. I haven't read this book all the way through, but I remember there's one guy who kind of teleports around and acts as a really bizarre kind of fighter teleporting mage guy. And so what I think, it was kind of clever to see different variations on the fighters and have them all do these separate little roles. But where I think you might actually run into a problem is where where I complained before that they were all kind of limited variations on 4 core classes, you might see a lot too much variation to where you might run into like a Rift style. Rift has like way too many OCCs. OCCs are like the character classes. And so you might run into this thing where all of a sudden you have like 30 to 40 books, all of them with little teeny OCCs, some of which are like radically unbalanced. And so some guy brings this bizarre like spell-slinging frisbee thrower, and you're like, what book is that from? And you're like, well, it's from Extreme Arcane Frisbee Throwers. And you're like, oh. And the OCC, if you've played Rifts, you know what I'm talking about, where there's like a zillion books, and all of them have these really bizarre OCCs in them. I think you might run into that. But what I really like about this game is that it makes DMing a lot easier. And the way they do that is in the monster manuals. And they need to release more of these, by the way. Balancing encounters for a player party is as easy as looking up the level rating. And people were complaining that it was kind of like, I forget what they called it, like buckets of gore, or like a room full of kobolds or something like that, where they were complaining that there are minions who have 1 hit point and there are monsters who have lots. And so people would complain that you could fill a room with like 31 hit point kobolds, and a guy would just like run through the room like just making them into chunky meatballs. Chunky salsa fighting, that was what it was called. And that's not the case. If you're a bad DM and you design your encounters badly, yes, you will run into that. But when you design an encounter well, you can design exactly balanced parties of monsters that don't seem contrived. Like, you don't wonder, like, why would this guy be in this room? No, you can have, like, if you want a room full of kobolds, you can have kobolds that are sensibly designed and balanced so that each one of them has a different role. So there's obviously, like, a kobold leader. There's some kobolds who like to throw stuff, and there's kobolds who are, like, melee experts. And then there's just, like a bunch of little minion grunts who run in and kind of pad out the numbers. It's really well done. If you've researched what you're going to do as a DM, you can make every encounter unique, exciting, and balanced enough to where they're challenging but not too much. So if you want a hard encounter, all you have to do is like throw an encounter 1 level higher. And I've seen a lot of bad DMs do really badly at this. But it's not that hard. So in that regard, I find this is a very good pick up and play. If you're not prepared for like a full campaign, this is great for ad-libbing in the sense that you can look in the index for, like, if you need a 3rd level encounter, you can open up to a 3rd level encounter, pick one that makes sense for the setting you're in, and it even comes with little suggestions for accomplices that these monsters have. Really well designed. And I'm really tired about people complaining about this game. It's good. Again, if you were to get me in a group, I would still choose the probably less well-designed AD&D, but I'm just an old-school guy, and that's just me. Some of the other books you might have noticed back here, that's AD&D. Song of Ice and Fire role-playing. Oh, wow. Song of Ice and Fire. Would love to try that. I'm a big fan of the novels, if you haven't guessed already. I'm still waiting very impatiently for the next one. What's taking so long, dude? I'm gonna... let's see. Oh, this is actually one of my favorite books. It's called Central Casting Heroes of Legend. A friend of mine had this a while ago, and this is kind of a bizarre character background generation book, where this entire book is filled with tables. And so you just start, and you roll for events during your childhood and your adolescence and adulthood. And it gets really bizarre. Like, let me see. You can start with, like, unusual events of your birth. And so when you roll, like, something bad might have happened during your birth. For instance, like, first you'll roll where you were born. And so you might be born just in your family home, or you might have been born outdoors in some kind of druidic circle, or you were born in a graveyard or a church or something like that. And depending on that, certain other things can happen. So if you were born in, like, a church, say, something you might roll like a bad omen occurred when you were born in the church, and so you go to a different table of what that bad omen might be, and suddenly an old crone would have burst into the room and said that you would bring death upon the world. And that doesn't mean anything in rule terms, but it's kind of a cool thing that that kind of fleshes out your character. And so you might have started with a birthmark, and so you roll on what shape and what color and where the birthmark is. There's 3 tables for that, and so maybe you were born with a sign of a hammer on your arm, and it doesn't mean anything again in terms of rules. This is not a D&D book, but for little character quirks and ideas, this was a really good book, Heroes of Legend, and I believe there were 2 more, one for sci-fi and one for like modern Call of Cthulhu era Heroes. I think I might have both, not here, but I have them on a different shelf somewhere. Those were not as good, just because those tried to cover too much. I think the Call of Cthulhu one also tried to cover like high-tech espionage and spycraft type campaigns, and it didn't really work. It was kind of, you got really, really strange, even for this series of books, strange type of backgrounds that didn't make much sense. Let's see. Yeah, I'm a very proud collector of these Planescape stuff. I have almost everything in terms of Planescape. There's probably a few adventure modules and little strange objects that I don't have, but by and large, I have pretty much all these boxes, which are really hard to come by. You know what the funny thing is? This is going to kill you. I've never run a Planescape game, ever. I've played in one, but Planescape was always one of those really fringe-type campaign settings where you get like 5 or 6 people around a table and you're like, hey guys, what do you want to play? And they'll be like, oh, we'll play D&D with you, fine. And we kind of wrestle about what campaign, and it usually revolves around like Homebrew, Forgotten Realms, or Greyhawk. And so we have a little argument of how nobody likes Forgotten Realms, and one guy's like, I like Forgotten Realms. I'm that guy. And somebody will like, what about Planescape? And everyone else kind of goes, I don't have the books for that. What's Planescape? That's kind of bizarre. Isn't that for high-level games? And everyone kind of gets scared off on that one. It's the same way most Shadowrun games start. Everyone wants to get around to play Shadowrun, and then there's like 2 or 3 people who are like, I don't have the books for that. Nobody wants to share their books, because if you give somebody your Shadowrun book, you'll never get it back, because they're always looking at the cybertech and trying to make their characters, and turns like, let's just play D&D instead. D&D is the great compromise game. Hackmaster. If you know much about me, you know that a while back I wrote for a magazine called Knights of the Dinner Table, made by Kenzer and Company, and they released a game called Hackmaster. And Hackmaster is the game, the Dungeons and Dragons game that the characters in the comic book played, and that was called Hackmaster. What is it? Really, it's AD&D. It's basically, in fact, I think they licensed AD&D and basically used the same rules to make Hackmaster. It's hard to take seriously because the game is kind of goofy and it's based on a comic book, but really, it's a good game. It's AD&D. It has a few kind of bizarre rules that I didn't like. It includes a lot of different races and different classes, kind of silly character kits. It's kind of like the Tokyo Gore Police of Dungeons and Dragons, where there's a lot of unnecessary violence and things like that. Still really fun, but people will kind of roll their eyes at you when they're asking what you're playing, and you're like, Hackmaster, and they're like, oh, really? What are you, a child? It's not bad, but I kind of realized that when I cut away everything I didn't like from Hackmaster, I got D&D, and really that's the choice. And so, if you're actually interested in getting AD&D and you can't find the books for AD&D, Hackmaster is a good choice, and it's not a compromise. I'm not saying like, if you can't find D&D, get this, because it's the same game, and it's actually kind of Hackmaster is kind of consolidated into one book, where D&D is kind of split among several books. If you're into this kind of gaming, there are used bookstores. Like there's a Bookman's down where I am. I don't know if you guys have Bookman's, but we have half-price books. And eBay's okay. I tend not to like to deal on eBay for books like that, because I find used bookstores are really good for that kind of thing. It's also good to have, before you start, try to have a group ready. And if you're into D&D Online, I would really suggest not going to D&D Online and trying to get together a legitimate D&D group, which is a little harder because you have to have people kind of locally, whereas on D&D Online you can have people anywhere. But D&D is a really, really fun game, and really you can't go wrong with any of these games. 4th edition even. Pick it up. If you're into D&D... Now, don't be a snob about this kind of thing. I am kind of a snob most of the time when it comes to stuff like this. And I'm telling you, it's okay. It may feel wrong. I felt dirty too. But it's not bad. And if you're dealing with some younger players who don't have access to this kind of stuff, this is pretty well done. Now, like I said, if you asked me in about a year or two how well balanced this thing is, I'd probably throw the Rift scenario at you. I don't know. We'll see. I got another shelf over there. Most of that is my third edition stuff. I kind of segregated that away, away from tainting the rest of this stuff. Anyway, I got other stuff to talk about, but this was my D&D rambling. So until next time, stay tuned. More rambling on the way.